All right, let's go over to our cornerback rankings now, Dalton. Who are your top 5 corners in this year's draft?
This was so hard. This was so hard to make the order of this, because I think the one thing that's not getting mentioned enough is just the level of talent in this cornerback class in general. Man, there are so many good ones, and the fact that we had to narrow it to 5, and then ordering these 5 was hard enough. But we'll get after it first at 5 with Nate Wiggins from Clemson. You've got speed and you've got length. I mean, he's a guy who can play press. He's a guy who, man-to-man, just looks the part. The only thing about him is his frame.
Yeah.
I think he weighed in at, 173 pounds it was at the Combine. He's light. And the only other thing for me is I don't think when I went back and watched, he wasn't tested all that much in the ACC. There's just not a lot of elite passing games in the ACC, really, other than Florida State. But lights out in the role that he did play. Obviously, Clemson played a ton of man-to-man because they had guys like Wiggins and Andrew Makuba and all that. There's a ton of potential. The only thing I worry about is if it's also something like, I watched a lot of Emmanuel Forbes this past year, and you could just see the footwork along with the light frame against certain receivers. Just it wasn't quite there yet. There was an adjustment period to the level of physicality in the NFL, so I worry about that a bit. But there's no question about his feet and his length in that frame, a 6'2" frame that can move like that, and the closing speed, even when he does get beat, is crazy. Wiggins has a ton of potential, but he has to get more physical. 4, and I love him, and this is 1 through 4. It kills me to put him at 4.
Don't do it.
But I went Kool-Aid McKinstry at 4. I think he wins with technique. He's as technically sound as any corner in this draft. But when they talk about you don't really see the top end traits, I get that. Now I think he's getting run down. I think you really might have 4 corners here who are 4 of the top 20 players in this draft. I think this is not at all to say Kool-Aid's like way in a tier below. Not at all. Because as from a technical sense and just how to play corner, he's spectacular. I just think the next 3 guys are so good, and there's so much potential like on the high end that this is just where Kool-Aid falls, but he should be picked in the top 20 to 25. Absolutely. 3 for me is his teammate Terrion Arnold. I think the first thing that jumped out at me was just hyper competitiveness. Like, wow, he brings all the talent. He's got speed. We've seen him kill the pre-draft process. So aggressive and so competitive. I got a L'Jarius Sneed feel out of Arnold. I think there's going to be teams who are going to look at him maybe as a slot corner, really, because he's just so aggressive and he's so good in run defense, and he just, even when he messes something up, he just goes 110 miles an hour constantly. It's for me, I think with Arnold, it's hard not to love just the sheer competitive spirit he plays with, and he's just so aggressive. He can play in any role, inside, outside. I think between Arnold and McKinstry, I think the versatility of the fact that Arnold might be able to play inside as well was probably the tiebreaker for me, but they're so close. 2, I've got Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. This is going to sound funny. I think he's the corner in this draft. Now, he's not as tall or long. I think he's 6 foot. I think he's the corner that the most in this draft plays like Sauce Gardner. Just a little bit of a wide base, can play really, really well, especially in cover 3 off. He can play in press. You could just tell for the last 3 years at Toledo, every field he stepped on, he was the best athlete. He was. And you could see the progression from winning with athleticism to winning with a combination of athleticism and technique at corner. And there's still some work to be done with his footwork. I think he's got the highest ceiling out of all of these guys. And he just has to just keep refining and keep getting his feet under him. Sometimes his feet can get a little wide, but the athleticism is almost unmatched in this class at corner. And he just was the best football player on every field that he walked on. And the ceiling, I think the ceiling is really like top 5 potential. And 1, I went with Cooper DeJean because I think he's the best football player right now. I see some Trent McDuffie in his game. Yeah. We've talked about it before. DeJean's tape is so good, it's boring. It is. It's boring. And it's weird for a guy who's got 7 interceptions the last 2 years, couple of pick sixes, good punt returner as well. But you watch DeJean, and every single play is so fundamentally sound. Like he just feels like his corner can be volatile and you can find a lot of busts and all that. He just feels like the safest player of all these guys. I don't have a whole, like I talked about Latu being 9th on the board for me. I don't think DeJean slots in too far behind that because he's just so sound. It's just I really it's hard to find. The only consistent thing I could complain about maybe is finding the ball on back shoulders. But otherwise, zone coverage, man coverage, press coverage, whatever you want, DeJean just does it right.
Yeah. No, that's a great breakdown, man. And we're gonna do a mock draft pretty soon. There's a spot for DeJean I like in the top 15 a lot that we're gonna get to when we do our mock draft pretty soon. But I'll start off with my number 5, and that is Nate Wiggins from Clemson. Elite speed, man. I love what he showed in coverage this past season. Obviously, the big thing with him is the frame, and he's 173 pounds. I mean, we saw how much I think you brought it up really well. I think Emmanuel Forbes is a guy that kind of scared me off Nate Wiggins a little bit because it's like, man, Emmanuel Forbes really struggled this past year. And I think Nate Wiggins is probably a better prospect than Emmanuel Forbes was coming out of Mississippi State. But I still think that Nate Wiggins is a guy that I'm a little bit lower on than some people just because of that frame, and I think he's got to put on some weight to handle the bigger receivers in the NFL. But his speed is elite, man. 4.28 40. Got some really, really good tools. Just got to put on some weight for me to be a little bit higher on him. Number 4, Terrion Arnold. I have from Alabama. Arnold was incredibly productive this past year. I think in part because of his teammate, which I'll get to in a little bit. But Terrion Arnold, man, is a really, really good player. I think he still has some work to do in terms of his footwork, and which I think could get him beat sometimes. But really, really good athlete that I think is just starting to hit his potential right now, which I think is very exciting for someone like him. Number 3, I think. All right, so I'm going to preface this by saying this: the top 3 you could put in any order, and I'd be okay with it. So at number 3, I think they're literally like neck and neck. I have Cooper DeJean from Iowa. Another interview that we got, if you want to check it out on the channel. Awesome kid, and he is all business, man. He is, like, I think you said it really well. He's just his technique, both in coverage and as a run defender. He is the best run defender, I think, at the cornerback position in this draft. He is an excellent tackler, really fills the gaps really well when he's asked to do that. Versatile player, can play in the slot, can play on the outside, can play safety if you absolutely need him to, even though I do think he deserves to be an outside corner in the NFL. But Cooper DeJean, man, I really love his tape, and I think he's a really athletic player too. He wasn't able to test out because of his injuries that he's had. I'm not sure if he's going to do a pro day pretty soon, but I'm a big fan of Cooper DeJean, dude, and I think he is, like I said, I think he's going to be a really productive player in the NFL. He's a high floor player. Number 2, I mentioned guys who've had excellent pre-draft processes like Braden Fisk. Quinyon Mitchell's right there with him, man, because at Toledo, so he was the highest graded corner in the country in 2022, highest graded corner in the country in 2023. But when you turn on the Toledo tape, obviously when you see a corner who's grading out that high, you see where he's from, Toledo. Okay, he's playing in the MAC, playing against awful quarterbacks, playing against some not great receivers compared to the what we have in the Power 5 either. And you also look at the scheme he's playing. He's playing a lot of off coverage. And you're like, okay, what does it look like when he's playing press coverage, man? Because he was not asked to do that at all. He was playing almost exclusively off coverage at Toledo. Goes to the Senior Bowl, plays press coverage, gets some really talented receivers, and dominates them. And then you're like, okay, wait a minute. Like, we might have something here with Quinyon Mitchell. Then he goes to the Combine, and he's the most athletic corner at the Combine as well. So all of a sudden you have this freak athlete, 98th percentile athlete at the Combine. That's the most athletic we had out of any of these corners in this draft. So elite athlete who proved he could play in press coverage, proved obviously with his elite tape at Toledo he could play in off coverage as well. I think he is a really, really good player that I'd be willing to take in the top 15 of this draft, man, because I think there's a lot of stuff to like with him at Toledo, and then obviously he's got an excellent pre-draft process to bank on as well. Number 1, hot take here, but I had to put my guy at number 1 because I've been singing his praises all year, and I think it's criminal what's happening to him right now. I got Kool-Aid McKinstry as my number 1 corner in this draft. Now, of course, like I said, you can put Quinyon number 1, you can put DeJean number 1, and I would not have a problem with it. I have Kool-Aid number 1 right now because, for me, production is more important than anything else, man. And this guy has been maybe the best corner in college football 2 years in a row now in a Nick Saban defense that asks a lot of their corners, and Kool-Aid was still fantastic. And the only reason that Terrion Arnold is going to go in the first round of this draft is because of number 1, is because of Kool-Aid McKinstry, because quarterbacks quite literally did not look to his side of the field, and they looked at Terrion Arnold. And that's why Arnold was targeted more, and Arnold obviously made some incredible plays, and that's why he's going to be a first-round pick. But that would not have happened if they didn't have a shutdown corner in Kool-Aid McKinstry. You want to talk about boring tape? Kool-Aid McKinstry's got boring tape, man, because they do not look at his way at all, but he is locking down players. Now, the big question for him, and why I think you're seeing guys like Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Terrion Arnold, Nate Wiggins, why they're probably going to go above him in the NFL draft, is that they're elite athletes. Kool-Aid's an above-average athlete. Kool-Aid's a 75th percentile athlete. Still good enough. Still ran out a 4.47 at his pro day, which is good enough, certainly. But he's not an elite athlete like the other guys are. But for me, he has been an All-American in 2022. He was an All-American in 2023. The tape matters more than anything, man. He has been the best corner in college football for 2 years in a row, basically playing in the SEC as well. I mean, I love Kool-Aid McKinstry, dude, and I think what is happening to him is criminal, and it's a lot like what I think was happening to Laiatu Latu, where it's like this guy's going to be the third edge off the board, this guy's going to be the fourth corner off the board. They should be the number one players, man, because they are the best players in college football at their position, in my opinion. So I got Kool-Aid at number one. Who is the sleeper, Dalton, that we're not talking about enough, though, in this cornerback class?
There's a lot. This is a deep class, and I feel like everybody's mentioned somebody once when you talk about the Florida State guys, and even I thought about Kamal Hadden here, but I'm gonna go even deeper than that. I'm gonna go to Tulane. I'm gonna go to Jarius Monroe. Started his career at Nichols, 3 really good years there. Transferred to Tulane, solid 2022. Had an interception of Caleb Williams in the Cotton Bowl, and parlayed that into a really good 2023. I think, with so much zone coverage being played, okay, there are such things as good zone corners. I think Monroe falls in that bucket. Really, really good length, somewhere between 6'1 and 6'2, 205, good size, really has a great feel, and his eyes are really good in zone coverage. Could his press and man technique use some work? Absolutely. It's why he's going to be probably somewhere between a 5th and 7th round pick. But his size, his eyes, and his feel for zone coverage, he won defensive MVP at the Shrine Bowl, had an interception in that game, just continues to very quietly produce in every situation that he's in. I think he's the type, to be honest, he's the exact type of corner like Jalen Watson and Josh Williams that Kansas City would take, and all of a sudden you just go, oh, there's another one. Of course. They've got another one, because I just think his feel for the game, and he still has more improvements to make, man-to-man especially, but even Tulane, they trusted him on an island a lot this year. He was on the solo side in a lot of formations, playing press, and then teams just wouldn't throw his way, because in the American, you're not going to just throw it at a team's best corner all the time, right? But Jarius Monroe on a Tulane defense that's been really, really good the last couple of years. He's been a big part of it. I like his size. I like his zone ability. I would take him somewhere in the 5th, 6th round.
Yeah, I don't hate that shout out at all. So you have a great zone corner that you're shouting out. I have a great man corner I'm shouting out, and your guy, dude, Renardo Green from Florida State. He is going to be, so he's 110 on the consensus board right now, so he fits the kind of outside the top 100 that we're looking for. Going to be probably a 4th round pick in the draft, man, but man, I think Trevor actually put it in an article. He says Renardo Green is the number 1 man corner in this year's draft, honestly, which is a very valuable thing. It's something that you should not be able to get in the 4th round, and yet he's going to be a 4th round pick. So I think Renardo Green, man, and man coverage is really, really good. Really calm player. I think he could be a number 2 corner for a team easily, especially if they play a lot of press coverage. I'm a huge fan of Renardo Green, and I'm also, if you want another guy to shout out, I think his teammate Jarrion Jones. If you want a slot corner, Jarrion Jones, man, is another guy that I think will be a day 3 pick probably, but I'm still a huge fan of. And Renardo Green, 82nd percentile athlete. He's got the athleticism to stick as a man corner in the NFL. I'm a huge fan of him in press coverage, and I think he was elite as a man corner this past season. So that's why I have him as my sleeper to watch in this draft. You could probably get in the 4th round.